This is just a quick video to show these Greenwall planters that I'm making, and these are sort of self-watering, or they've really just got a water reservoir at the base. And I've also got a soil feeding station, which is just a galvanized wire mesh cylinder in the center. I've got this wrapped down round with a bit of corrugated cardboard, and then I've got layers of food scraps and shredded paper around the outside of this one, because I've got the planting pockets, the holes drilled in the sides for the kind of vertical planting. I've lined this with corrugated cardboard, and what that does is it just provides a sort of almost like a mulch. It just stops the compost from drying out around the edges, because the cardboard itself will wick the moisture, and it also holds in the compost whilst the plants are getting established. When the plants are rooted in and established, they'll self-shade, which helps to minimise the sort of evaporation from the outsides of the container, and also the roots themselves will bind together the compost and the substrate inside. With the soil feeding station on this one, I've made it quite a large diameter. I haven't measured this one, I just cut it off roughly and just made it so you can fit your sort of hand down inside that. So if you look at it directly from above, there's quite a good amount of kind of worm habitat, and the actual planting depth is fairly small, so you're not using up a huge amount of compost to fill these containers up. And the idea with the galvanized mesh, because rather than just being a grow bucket, these are going to be like a vertical planter. So the plan is, what I will do is I'll have a second reservoir, and the reservoir will be supported by that mesh initially until the compost compacts a little bit and settles down around that container. So that one, I haven't actually filled this one up, but you can see there's a plastic subfloor, and I've just got some cardboard in the base just to basically use up cardboard and just provide a bit more food for bedding for worms. That will be right at the base of the reservoir itself. But the idea with these is I want to regulate the moisture level, so it gets a chance to sort of cycle through these, so they're not constantly underwater. So every couple of weeks this might actually get a little bit dry, but then you'll top it up again, and then the water will, ideally it will fill up from the top, and then it percolate down and then be captured into the reservoir at the base. With these ones I've got a 90-degree elbow here, and with these I'm burying the bottom part into the soil because there's not really much going on in there, and these are white HDPE, which isn't UV stabilized, so I wanted to cover that up from the damaging effects of sunlight on there. But with this I'm going to get a PET bottle, use that as a funnel with an inverted plastic flower pot over the top to stop amphibians and creatures from falling in that. And then I'll just lift that, and I'll make sure that reservoir's topped up every couple of weeks or something like that. In the winter it's not so critical because you haven't got the evaporation, your water loss from the heat and the warmth of the sun so much. So what I was going to say, I've got various reservoirs. This one is going to be the same as this one down here, so it's got to kind of have a 90-degree elbow. I was using the black fitting, so it's a little bit more discreet than the white overflow pipe, which is just the one I had. I made them originally from the white HDPE, and I found a source for these free locally, so I'm using up quite a few of these black containers now. And I think once they're used as planters, once the plants are grown around there, they don't stand out, they look quite attractive, I think. With this one, you're not going to be able to see much because it's already got the it's really heavy. I'll just take the grow bucket off the top. So this one, it's got, once again, it's the same subfloor. It's got the this is just a piece of acrylic that I laser cut. Just got this newspaper there. It just makes a good sort of capillary wicking element. And this one I just had some cans, so they're just little Tango cans, I think they were. And what I've got in here as well, you can see the corrugated cardboard. I've got a PET bottle there, and then I've made a roll of just corrugated cardboard and some cotton, just fabric, just old t-shirts, and then rolled that up so that makes like a wick, and then the moisture is down in the bottom. But what I've done on this one is going to be quite hard to see, and I can't really lift this up. You can see this is the top of the container, and I've just got a bit of a UPVC overflow pipe, and that goes through a rubber grommet, and that's watertight in there, and then that goes up to where this hole is here. So well, slightly below that level where that hole is. So when you water it from the top, it overflows into the container below. The only thing is with this one, you haven't really got any visible way of seeing if it's full. But what you'll do is you'll notice these will in effect be like an overflow, so that the plants, well, the water will come out of those holes there. When I was making these originally, I just thought I'd have the black container with 9 holes, 9 holes on the deep side, and then because these aren't square, they're sort of rectangular, and then the 6 holes on the front. Originally I was going to have those, so if you imagine this as a green wall, that would be the surface of the wall, but I've actually done them the other way round. It's a bit more stable that way because they're deeper, and what I've got all the fillers on the narrow side. It doesn't really make much difference. The idea is that I'm going to have a number of these and build them up and to make the green wall. But what I realised after making them, some of the succulent plants will actually grow right in the reservoir itself. And what I was trying to achieve with this is I didn't want the plants to be sitting in kind of saturated anaerobic sort of water without any oxygen in there. I wanted this water to sort of cycle through, so I really want to use as much of that irrigation as I can, and then just use rainwater, and then just from an oxygenated supply with a bubbler, and then I can have sort of refill that water so the water's changed. What I did notice as well, where I had these, I put some plants actually down in the reservoir itself, and they rooted fantastically. And what that does is it draws the water up, so you're getting more of a more water use through this container, so it's not standing there quite so often. But what that means is the water is being changed more frequently, so there's more oxygen in the water, and the worms that are down in the corrugated cardboard and the cotton and all that soil life that's down there, and I've got sort of some of these ones I've used logs rather than tin cans, so it's almost like hugelkultur as well. The worms will start breaking down that material, so they're circulating as well as sort of, well, the worms are doing a few things. They're breaking down that material, but then they're also aerating the compost in this container as well, because they'll be moving in between the soil feeding station and the compost. But what I have noticed is when they work down through the lower layers of this level in the planter into the capillary matting and newspaper and cardboard in the reservoir, that makes a really nice sort of seamless in terms of transporting water from the container to the top. Once that's established, that's a really good sort of flow through there, and then you'll notice this is wicking up around about 300 millimeters into this container. So all these holes, they'll be irrigated. This is just I've set this up. You can see the water is up around about 200, but this is getting quite dry at the top. Once you've got all the worms and the soil life and the activity in there, these are really effective. You don't have to water them, just water them from the bottom. But what I did notice as well, on these containers here, I've got these holes primarily as overflows, but what it does enable you to, it gets a sort of bit of finger hold there, so you can move those, because you imagine once that's all full of logs and water and wood chip and biochar and charcoal and things like that, really quite heavy, so it just makes it a little bit more manageable. But what I noticed with those, I could actually plant through those holes as well, plant into the top of the container, so when that sits on top, you've got another level of greenery, and then you can plant here as well. So if you imagine that's like that, I haven't got the subfloor in there, there'll be another container here. So it's not just those 6 holes here and those 6 holes there, you've got a level here which you can plant up. You can plant up into that level there, you can plant through those holes there, you can plant that level, you can plant onto the top here, and then when this has just got a green roof lid on top, you can also plant around that lid. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and if that had holes in there, 8 additional levels of planting. So once those plants are established, they really do sort of give you quite a nice seamless sort of green wall effect. The other thing I'll notice as well, if you can get plants where they put out runners, occasionally I'll take these off just to sort of top up the soil feeding stations, and obviously the plant roots they'll leave the kind of runner there, but it will spread the spread of the plant around between the containers. So they do make quite a nice sort of additional place to start planting. And as I said, these are reclaimed containers, so they are free to pick up if you can find a car wash near to you. They use these for I can't remember what it was. I think it was a detergent for an alloy wheel cleaner. It's like a caustic sort of solution, but it breaks down with water. So what you want to do is there might be a bit of residue in here, but if you've got a car or a bike or something like that and you want to clean up the wheel rims and things, I'd get a good supply of water run through there, change it a few times, and then because I cut the top of the bucket off, it makes a good sort of washcloth container as well, so you can really make sure that's really thoroughly cleaned out. I'm not actually growing anything that I'm going to be eating in these containers. I wouldn't worry about that myself. I've looked at the information on the labels on the detergents, and because these are used in car washes, it all has to go down the sort of normal sort of domestic drains, so it's not anything that it doesn't actually break down. So yeah, it's all water sort of soluble. So yeah, it's quite a good system. I do like these containers. The black ones do last quite a long time. I've had the white ones maybe 3 years outside. They're okay, but I try and protect those from sunlight if you can, because if they're exposed to the full strength of the sun, they will tend to deplasticize after a number of years and break down. So because I'm investing a bit of time making these, when I make these I use a jig to get the holes quite nice and neat. And it's obviously time, but there's no money and there's no financial aspect involved. You've obviously got a grommet, which is I don't know, £4 for 50 or something like that, and these are about 50p each or something like that. But once established, I think these do make a really nice additional sort of green space, a growing space. And if you've got a small patio or even a balcony or something like that, if you want to grow and you haven't got soil to grow into, but you also want to have vermicomposting. So with these containers, the soil's being replenished. And what I have noticed is, in terms of plant health, it's not so much the fact that the soil's being fertilized by worms. It's the fact that they're building soil sort of structure, and they're providing aeration, and they're working that organic matter in. So I think with if you're sort of new to gardening, or if your kind of experience of gardening has been through I don't know, buying bags of multi-purpose compost and then putting I don't know, tomato food on, and sort of thinking you've got to feed plants that way, this method of growing is you're sort of basically feeding the soil, and you're not supplementing the plants by giving them a sort of chemical feed. It's just using you might want to have like compost teas or worm teas or something like that. I don't really tend to use that. I'm really more about just adding lots and lots of organic matter. And you can see how the plants grow. You can, if a plant is green and healthy and verdant, you know it's not stressed. If the plant is showing signs of stress, if it's got yellowing leaves, if it's dry or whatever, it makes it more prone to disease. So obviously, if you're growing sort of crops and things, you've only got a limited amount of space in here. So what I've done in that case is just use a larger container, and then used versions of these 25 litres containers still to provide wicking, so you've got that capillary action, but also larger ones of these to actually make soil feeding stations, so you've got a large bulk of material in there. But I think what is quite nice about having these, even a large container with one of these sort of smaller, like a container within a container, it just makes managing that material and that compost so much easier, because it's all subdivided into sections. And if you've got sort of one of those Dalek compost bins, a small compost bin about, I don't know, 200-300 litres, If you've got to fill up a large container, that's going to take loads and loads of compost. If you're doing it sort of traditionally, just filling up, almost like using compost as topsoil. But with these, even with these containers here, you can see how much volume is actually taken up by that soil feeding station. So the amount of compost, and even if you were growing stuff in plugs, you'd have your sort of a dozen sort of plants, and then the actual compost is fairly minimal. And what I did here, I used shredded paper because that holds a little bit of moisture as well. So these are deep containers. With these things, because it's organic and you're really waiting for the sort of soil life to sort of get kicked off in terms of improving the surrounding soil and the conditions for the plants. What I do notice is initially the plants nearer the irrigation they'll sort of establish faster. The ones higher up will take a little bit longer. They'll be a little bit delayed. The conditions up here are a little bit drier, and because you've got the soil feeding station down there, moisture will tend to sort of settle down towards the bottom, and most of the worm activity will be down here. But then as the container establishes and that material sort of settles and is used up by the plants, you can just take the top off and then use the top of the container like a kind of worm soil feeding station. So you're adding fresh organic matter, and because there's already a sort of a good healthy population of worms in there, then that established sort of soil's life will really get breaking down that fresh organic matter much faster. So they do take time to get established, and like any kind of organic planting, if you're doing a comparison between using sort of I don't know, ammonium nitrate and artificial fertilizers, the ones on the artificial fertilizers initially they'll be probably established much faster, but with compost mulches there is a time delay in terms of how long it takes to get established. But once you've basically sort of replenished the soil life in the soil, then you do notice that everything is doing so much better. And when it comes to things like weeding or transplanting, you've got a soil structure in there, you've got worms in there, and that's one reason I wanted to bury these in the ground itself, have a lot of wood chip in there, because then you'll get lobworms. The lobworms will go in, they'll feed on the casts, they'll move, distribute material from around this, so even in the heavier clays they'll work that material up into this, and obviously after a number of years it basically equalizes what you've got in here to the surroundings, so you're constantly feeding from the top, and then that's working around in improving those conditions. It doesn't just stay pure cast and then clay and then wood chip, it's obviously being sort of integrated into the surrounding sort of environment as well. But the video is a little bit longer than I wanted to make it. Losing light here, so I think that's about time to sign this one off. Thanks for watching.